Hey, Composite Gloves here. This is the 18th video in the Massive from the Ground Up tutorial series, and today we are going to take a look at the FX section in Massive. Now, if you didn't watch the feedback one, go check that one out, because the way FX work are basically a bunch of different kinds of feedback loops. And so let's just get right into it. So what happens on the routing tab, as we discussed before, our effects line up right here. And so this is where they're introduced. So after you send them through your whole process, they'll be introduced to whatever effects you so send here, and this you've enabled the bypass. So the way reverb works is there's a whole bunch of different ways to create reverb, but the general idea of reverb is you take the signal that you're sending to it. So in this case, it would be this signal or sine wave, and you resample that signal, and you modulate the beginnings of the refraction. So in a real space, your voice would bounce off of all the walls and whatever else is in the room, and it would create the reverb that you hear. And so what they've done here is they've created the size of the room, which is essentially how long your refractions will last. So bigger rooms, longer refraction. So this could be called length. Density, which would be the amount of echoes that would happen. And then you also have color, which essentially is like a filter. This, a very light filter. This makes your sound brighter. This one makes it sound a little duller. It's sort of like a really, really light low pass filter. So here's our signal. There's the reverb. And it's taking it and running it through a feedback loop. And you hear that kind of, it sounds like someone's dropping like maybe pebbles or something. This is the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of Massiv's reverb, but that's a result of the density and the size. So if you turn the size way up and the density way up, so a lot more echoes and a very long decay, you still get it. You could try turning the decay down to make it line up more with the original signal, but it's still delayed, which is a big bummer. But you can use it for light reverb things, and the algorithm they use just takes it and they modulate that according to the parameters you set here. They modulate the feedback loop that it's using. So I don't know if you can hear what the color knob does. So sort of sounds like wind, so you could use this parameter as well to create some wind effects. And then all the parameters have this dry wet, which is basically just the amount of signal that's being affected. This is only wet signal, only dry, some in between, very similar to the modulating thing. So the small reverb uses the exact same algorithm, they just changed the effects. So this is a much lighter reverb. But you still get that kind of transient at the beginning of your sound from the echoes that are being reintroduced into your signal, and I'm just not the biggest fan. So I recommend, if you don't like that, using a third-party plug-in reverb. Well, which does the same thing, just different algorithms, just running things through numbers. So a flanger, we're going to go to flanger positive mono first. The way a flanger works is it takes some of your signal, and now what reverb's doing is it's taking, I believe they're called late regeneration. That's what it's called. And so early refractions are within a few milliseconds, and then you have your middle ground. There's a whole bunch of different stages, and then there's like late refractions, which would be the reverb. So you're hearing the results of late refractions. Flanger takes like the middle ground refractions, which I forgot their name right now, and it reintroduces it into your signal. And the thing about early refractions, not middle, the early ones, is you can't discern them from the original signal. And part of that, so if someone's refractions were like within a few milliseconds of them speaking, I believe it goes up to like 30 or 50. I may be dead wrong. But these early refractions, you can't tell that they're not part of the original signal. Like there's no way for you to discern the room. It's just too fast for you to discern. And what a flanger does is it takes some of those middle to early refractions and it sends them back in, merging them back into the original signal. The amount that gets sent back is the feedback. You'll notice that they're also modulating sources, so you can use your envelopes and LFOs to modulate these parameters. But the feedback is the amount of signal. The depth is basically how far, it's sort of like a filter, how far it can go into your signal. Like right now, it's not even letting in very much through the higher end of the frequencies. Now it's being let through some more. And now it's just going through all of them. And then you'll see we have our rate knob. And that just controls the rate that the feedback is introduced. And the reason you have flanger positive is they can actually, it has to do with the phase. This is positive phase, mono, because this is a stereo signal now. And then you have your one where it starts off at a negative signal. And you have positive mono. So it starts right on the positive peak. Or you can hear the sort of the click. I don't know. You kind of have to know what you're looking for. So on an LFO, positive starts here, negative starts here. And that could be real important depending on what you're trying to do. But that's what that does. And you could use it for just some light reverb effect to create some maybe room perception. Flanger really wouldn't be the one to do that for, because as I just said, though, they're not taking those refractions. Chorus also uses a feedback loop, and the way it's supposed to emulate, sort of like a choir. So dry, you have your original sine wave. And a choir, the way a choir, the reason it sounds so lush is so many people are starting at all these different times, and they're all slightly different pitches. Even though they're all ideally supposed to be on the same pitch, they're all slightly different. They're all slightly off. And so what that is, what the chorus is trying to emulate. And so the rate at which these different delayed signals are being introduced at their different pitches is, that's the rate, and this changes the modulation of that, if you understood that. And so you can hear the signal being introduced on the delay time at a different rate than down here. Sort of like an LFO. You can hear the rate being modulated by a controlling LFO. And the same as like the rate knob right here. And then the offset is how off the pitch is. And then the depth works the same way, the amount of frequencies that it's allowed to affect. So if we were to play some chords, this would be better with a different wave. So you see, you can find some middle grounds to create some real subtle effects unless you want something much larger. And again, this is a stereo signal, and then they have a mono version. And then you can come down here to the chorus ensemble, and this is supposed to be more like an actual ensemble. So I'd even say they kind of increased the voice count on this one a little bit. But I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it just sure sounds like that. You can see the pitch changing around too, so you know it's moving the pitch. That's what the chorus does. And if you were to go to like a saw, saws are great for this kind of a thing because they have so much harmonic content. Oh, and I have it on monophonic. Let's change that. So there you go. Chorus, great options. Now you have a phaser. The way a phaser works is basically like a bunch of all-pass signals. Now if you remember, the all-pass takes the particular frequency you're at and inverts the phase. And the way a phaser works is it does that a whole bunch of times, and it sends that phase inversion through your signal the same way the depth works, except for the depth still works as the depth. So this is like, if you have it right here, it'll take it, like say this is where the depth is set. It'll take the phaser and send it down here and then stop and then do it again and then stop and then do it again. And that's what the depth does. So all the way, goes all the way through, and it keeps looping. The feedback is the amount of phase inverted signal you're allowing back in. And you also have your rate, which is how fast it's being sent back in again. And again, this can be a mono signal, so it doesn't mess with your stereo mix or whatever. Or it could be a stereo signal, which is the one we were messing with. Now you have a delay. It's pretty much the exact same thing as any other delay. You have a damp, which has a damp, which acts as a low pass to your delay. And you can change the time. Now this is basically like a really specific reverb. You can, so having them both over means the signal will come in immediately, like so, with no dampening on. And then if you change one just a little bit, it all of a sudden sounds like it's sort of in a room. See, that's back to normal. And that's just taking one refraction. And you'll see there's now stereo information here because the blue is the other speaker. I believe green is right and blue is left. That's what the delay does. And then you have a delayed sync, which allows you to sync it. And of course your reverb damp does the same thing. It's a low pass. Dry wet does the same thing as everything else. The feedback allows, how much of the delay feedback is let back in. If you hold down the note, it should be noted that the delay happens, but it happens to your original note and also when you let go of the note. So this is to the release, to the initial transient, which would be the beginning of your note, and the release. So important note. And you can change these ratios right here, and they work the same as the ratios right here, except for they're speaker specific. So you could have 8 come out of the left and only 4 out of the right. And you can mess with those ratios however you desire. Again, with the same way working as the sync knobs in the LFO when you sync it. So then you have the dimensional expander, and now that we've discussed how all these other things work, it's no surprise that all the dimensional expander is it's basically a chorus with some reverb. So it's just taking different refractions that we don't have control over, because we could enable the second effects and create our own dimensional expander. But they've done us the joy of just putting it on something already. And it's supposed to just emulate room. That's why all you have size and dry wet, but it's essentially a reverb and a chorus, taking late or regeneration refractions and the middle refractions. And you can hear that super annoying ping sound. It sounds like someone's like rubbing something against her, dropping a pebble on her sound or something. And if you move these size things, it has to send that data through the algorithm, and so you get these like squelch sounds. You can see the reverb effect. It's sending that delayed signal back through, and that's why you get that sound. It is a product of digital processing algorithms. Now, they do have some tubes on here. It should be noted that all these tubes are only available on FX1. FX2, they're not available. You only have the delay, things that are based on delay available. So if you're going to use a tube, you should put them on here. Another quick note. Now you know, I just want to point out, now you know how crazy feedback can get. Any plugin you use that has anything like this just has a different feedback option. And now these tube ones are sort of simulating, they're simulating actual tubes out there that are like analog equivalents. And so to show you what this does, I'm going to choose a sine wave because it's just easiest. Now these could be specific. They take in values and they evaluate the values that are coming through to tell through an algorithm to tell the tube how to behave. So it may behave differently for a square wave than a triangle wave and all other such things, different waveforms. But we can learn a lot just from observing a sine wave. So we have our sine wave. I'll zoom in. And we can turn it on. Let me zoom back out. You'll notice that we get a square wave. And if you think about it, or if I pause it, the S shape. And if you think about it, that is exactly what the parabolic shaper is designed to do. It just uses a slightly different algorithm. See? The gain does not go up though, because this is using, I'm pretty sure, a feedback loop, which causes gain to increase, but not when it's all the way on. They've given us a cap, so we can't achieve what we can with the feedback down here. So now you're starting to understand why all these different feedback loops are important, why different algorithms do accomplish different sounds, because they use different methods. And now we have the teletube. So if we turn this off, there's our sine wave, turn it on. It pushes the positive values up to a square wave, but it keeps our bottom values. It also increases in the gain, but it keeps our bottom values rounded like a sine wave relatively. And so really important note. Perhaps that will be important to whatever you're doing, but just so you know, that is what's happening. And then that's what the drive just turns it on more. Dry wet is the amount of original signal let through, all the way wet. So they're almost like the same knob now. So that's classic tube, teletube. The last one's the Bronner tube. And now this is something that the shapers can sort of do. If we turn on the sine shaper, it's sort of, you see how it forces it towards the sine wave, but these harmonics aren't close enough. Well, these ones accomplish that using a different higher harmonics, just using a different algorithm to add in that modulation source through the feedback. And that is, or you know what, I'm not sure how they did this, but it's got to be using some sort of feedback algorithm type dealio, or introducing another harmonic through maybe an entirely separate signal that we don't even know about. I don't know. But that's what the tube distortions are basically, just to create a more rich tone. So if you're making your sound, you want to sound beefier, people oftentimes use a tube unit for that. And so you can beef it up with that. And then you also notice we get some phaser action going on down here. It's more obvious when we turn it to a square. Except for it's because of the algorithm they're using, it's messing with these harmonics right here, which if we turn it off, those go away completely. On the sine wave, all it is a single pulse, so you can hear the phaser effect because it's adding harmonic content. It's still around the same volume. So really interesting. Check those out. And then now you know, first of all, now you know the power of the reverb. All plugins are basically just using different refractions when it comes to phasing, flanging. And hopefully I described the difference good enough for you on the all-pass filter. And yeah, anyways, feedback loops are insane. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to learn more about Massive. Share this video with someone who can use it. And have a blessed day.